Hey, everybody. So, predatory capitalism pays well. If you eliminate your competition, you operate at a loss, you manipulate the tax laws in different states, so you can undermine brick and mortar stores. Well, guess what happens then? Guess what happens? Jeff Bezos, richest person in history of the world, richer than any king in the history of the world, richer than anybody. There it is. Predatory capitalist and owner of the Washington Post. So this guy is literally, and he looks like Dr. Evil. He shaves his head so he can go like this. So he's worth over $100 billion. $100 billion. So if you spend $1 billion a week, oh my God, think about how much money that is. He couldn't spend it all in a year. We'd have to take him. So there he is, the richest person in the world. And you know how they do it, right? They, again, like I said, predatory capitalism. They get rid of unions. They undermine the tax bases in local municipalities. They bribe politicians. And that's why he bought the Washington Post, so he can keep influencing politics. He's also on the board of Pentagon. He's in bed with the Pentagon, and he's in bed with the CIA to the tune of $600 million a year. And Washington Post doesn't seem to have a critical story of him. Isn't that weird? The Washington Post doesn't have a critical story. It's like if Trump bought the Washington Post and they never wrote a negative story about it. That's what Trump should have did, because it only cost $200 million. His deal with the CIA is worth 3 times that, or $250, whatever he paid for it. It wasn't much. It wasn't much. The guy's worth $100 billion. He paid $250 million for the Washington Post. That's nothing. That's nothing. And so why do I bring this up? Well, this is from the Columbus Dispatch. Amazon makes list of large companies with workers receiving food stamps. So how do you make the richest man in the world the richest man in the world on the backs of poverty wages? By exploiting people, not giving people a living wage. That's how you do it. You think some of that, if he took $50 billion and spread it around his company, I bet everybody could have a living wage from now until the year 2500. But that's not how capitalism works. Capitalism works like this. One guy gets all the money and all the people who generate it get fucked. And that's what's happening. Amazon has become one of Ohio's largest employers after receiving tens of millions of dollars in state tax incentives. Really? For building warehouses, data centers, and other projects along the way. I wonder how much they had to bribe politicians to get those tax incentives. I wonder how much money they bribed, because that's how Jeff Bezos does his business, by bribing people and creating monopolies. He's not if that's what makes you a good businessman.
Well, Jimmy, let's not forget there are about 5 cities right now doing the exact same thing, trying to, outbid the other one to get Amazon to have a presence in their town. I wonder if they're going to see this article. I wonder if they're going to see how it's working out for Ohio.
Yeah, let's have Amazon come and lower our standard of living, because that's what they do. Now, the online giant has quickly made its way onto another list, one charting the state's employers with the most workers and their family members who also qualify for food stamps. So this is the world we're in now since Ronald Reagan, since 1980, when they started supply-side trickle-down economics. And, it started with Jimmy Carter getting rid of the regulation around trucking, Ted Kennedy getting rid of the regulations around airlines, Ronald Reagan firing the PATCO, the airline traffic controllers, decimating unions, and Democrats going right along with it and not standing up. Well, 30, 40 years later, what's the result? The result is we have a 2-tiered society. We have no middle class anymore. We have rich and poor. That's where 63% of the country can't afford a $1,000 emergency in the richest country in the world. This is the result. And everybody, Jeff Bezos, great job. I love Jeff. Jeff Bezos is what's wrong with the goddamn economy. Jeff Bezos is what's wrong. And the people who prop him up. I would like to see a reporter at the Washington Times write a critical story about Jeff Bezos. And they won't, because they're ballless. They're ballless. They get into journalism to do fucking journalism, and what they're really doing is chasing a paycheck. They still get to write good stories, but not about the main guy. It's like, hey, you can come write stories about Nazi Germany, but nothing about Hitler. Okay? That's what's going on at the Washington Post. And they're the ones that people think we need to look to oppose Trump. We need to oppose Jeff Bezos. We need a newspaper to stand up to Jeff Bezos. Because this is what happens to your country when you let motherfuckers like Jeff Bezos own the paper of note, bribe every goddamn politician, and create monopolies. Do you know half of all internet purchases in the United States go through Amazon.com? You don't think we should break that up? I do, but we ain't going to do it because the Democrats and Republicans worship corporate power. We don't have a government anymore that represents people. This is not a democracy. How many times we have to tell you they've studied this? It's an oligarchy. What we want has no effect on the policies passed. Perfect example, gun legislation. After Sandy Hook, 90% of the country wanted gun legislation. We didn't get it. 80% of the people wanted a public option. We didn't get it. Over half the country wants Medicare for all. We ain't getting it. What do you call that? You call that an oligarchy. That's not a democracy. That's not a government that reflects the will of the people. It's the exact opposite. It screws over the will of the people at the behest of money. And Jeff Bezos, people can't line up to kiss his balls hard enough. Amazon had 1,400. This is the story in America. And it's not being told by the Washington Post. It's not being told by the New York Times. It's not being told. Here it is. We got a local paper, the Columbus Dispatch. They're going to tell it. And Amazon had 1,430 workers and family members receiving benefits as of August, the group said Friday. A typical food stamp beneficiary receives benefits for about 2 people, meaning Amazon likely has about 700 workers receiving food stamps, more than 10% of its Ohio workforce. The richest guy in the world, the people who make his profits, are in poverty. Nobody has a problem with that. Nobody says, hey, that's kind of effed up. Maybe we should. I'm sure Rachel Maddow and Chris Hayes, because Chris Hayes is an old union reporter, I bet he's going to be screaming about it. No. To be eligible for food stamps, a family of 3 could make no more than $26,208 a year, or about $12.60 an hour for someone working 40 hours a week. Oh, my God. So someone working for the richest capitalist in the history of the world doesn't even make $12.60 an hour.
Yep.
That's pretty. There's a little bit more to this. Walmart, the state's top private employer with 50,000 workers, also has the most employees and their families getting food stamps. So our big employers, like it used to be when I grew up, Sears Roebuck was the big employer. Sears, right? And guess what Sears did? It paid a living wage to every person who worked at their goddamn store. Because we used to have this idea that workers got to have a living wage in America and they got to participate and enjoy some of the profits of their labor. That stopped in 1980, coincidentally. That stopped. So that is no longer. When I was a kid, you could go be a guy who sold shoes at Sears and make a living and have a family and a car and go on 2 weeks vacation every year. You could sell appliances. You could sell lawn equipment. You could sell men's suits. You could do all that stuff at Sears and make a living wage. Now you work at Walmart. It's the worst job in the goddamn city. The biggest employer gives you slave wages, poverty. Hey, you want to come work for us and be in poverty? That's our big success. That's capitalism's big success stories. Walmart and Bezos, Amazon. Those are capitalism's big success stories. What does it tell you about capitalism? It's fucked up. And here's a guy, Dylan Ratigan, who I love, who told the truth about the banks on MSNBC, so he's got to do his news reports from a dock on a lake. And here's even he can't help. I love Dylan. He can't help giving a tongue bath to Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos is not a good guy. Jeff Bezos is the face of evil right now. You remember what Amazon would rather do at their fulfillment centers, at their warehouses? Instead of putting an air conditioner in there, they would rather hire an ambulance to sit outside their warehouse, and when someone passes out, they drive them to the hospital because that costs less money. That's capitalism. That's capitalism. That's Jeff Bezos. Yay! Watch Dylan Radigan. He's going to tell you the problem after a tongue bath. Here we go.
The real issue in America is the concentration of resources in an incredibly small number of hands, whether it's Google and Facebook, whether it's the two political parties in our political system, or whether it's what's happening with Amazon, a beautiful vision, an incredible executive, an incredible company.
A beautiful executive? What is great about this? This kills our economy. So I'm sure he means it in a different way than I'm hearing it, because there's nothing good about what Jeff Bezos is doing. He's undermining local tax bases. He's bribing politicians. He's buying the paper of note. He's in bed with the deep. What the F is? And he's making all his employees in poverty. What is good about that? Yeah, he has an incredible vision of how to fuck over the country. Because that, while enriching himself. What kind of a fucking vision is that?
Well, the vision of an evil genius.
That's the vision of an evil genius.
That's just,
Yes. While he undermines the tax base of local municipalities, takes good jobs and turn them into shitty ones, while he becomes the richest person in the history of the world. That's a beautiful vision for a fucking evil genius, exactly what Ron said. So now we're going to get to the good part.
But a disastrous effect on our society as we're seeing the complete concentration of power.
So I just got to ask that question. How could those two things be the same? How could it be a beautiful and a great vision and an amazing company, but disastrous for everybody except Jeff Bezos? Well, then it's not any of those things. It's not any of those good things you said. It's an evil genius's plan to fuck over the country and enrich himself. Let's take it from the top.
The real issue in America is the concentration of resources in an incredibly small number of hands, whether it's Google and Facebook, whether it's the two political parties in our political system, or whether it's what's happening with Amazon, a beautiful vision, an incredible executive, an incredible company, but a disastrous effect on our society as we're seeing the complete concentration of power, and as a result, the destruction of the ability for a truly competitive capitalist environment. So while it is impressive to see, and I have incredible respect for Jeff Bezos and what he has done, it is a total abdication of the authority of the antitrust commissions in this country to allow this level of consolidation of power to continue, and it's reflected not only in our politics, but as we saw with the Amazon deal, in our business.
So I still stand by my admiration and affection for Dylan Radigan, and I don't understand that kind of need to, give homage to Jeff Bezos, a guy who he admits had disastrous. What Jeff Bezos is doing, his brand of business, has disastrous effects for the country. And Jeff Bezos, guess what, Dylan? He doesn't give a fuck. He doesn't give a fuck what he does to anybody or the disastrous effects of his goddamn company. You know what he gives a fuck about? Himself. And you know why? Because he's a fucking maniac. That's why. Because he is a narcissistic megalomaniac. What do you think? What kind of a person amasses $100 billion while his employees are starving? What kind of a person does that? A fucked up maniac who doesn't give a fuck about you, the country, the people who generate his income. Nobody. Nothing. That's not a normal person. And by the way, he's in bed with the CIA, he's in bed with the Pentagon, and he owns the Washington Post, so you better fucking watch it. You say anything about the richest guy in the world, maybe that's why Dylan said that shit, because he knows. Say anything about the richest guy in the world. First of all, the CIA's got every fucking phone call, text, and email you ever goddamn made. Anyway, how does so this is the result. This is the result of these are capitalism's two big success stories: Walmart and Amazon, and their employees are fucking in poverty.
Well, and you were talking about just the diminishing of workers' rights, and it goes beyond living wage. I mean, that's appalling enough in and of itself. But it bleeds into other areas as well. We did a story on how truck drivers were having to wear diapers to make their routes for Amazon.
Right.
And that's happening with logistics. You know, I used to be a road comic. I would travel 45 weeks a year. I met a couple truckers in my pursuits, and they would tell me, like, the routes that they're given generally by these big companies, Amazon being one of them, but there's other culprits too, like, they're not possible to keep. Like, you have to cook the books to make your routes. And if you don't make your routes, guess what happens? You lose your job. So these people are on the road and they're tired and they're overworked. And that's not just dangerous for the worker, that's dangerous to everybody else on the road too. So, I mean, these workers' protections that have been gutted with reduced benefits, loss of overtime, I mean, it really is. It is 40 years of neoliberal nonsense and corporatism that's gotten us to this point.
And you know what? These people that are working at Amazon, they're our neighbors. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They are just people that we see all the time that are the working poor. And they like it that way. They keep you poor. They keep you voiceless. You have no voice. You have no protections. And that's the way the economy is working. And when the Democrats get their heads out of their ass and start giving us a jobs program, we won't have to deal with people like Jeff Bezos, who's exploiting every person that he comes in contact with.
And you know why people go to work for Jeff Bezos and Walmart? Because there aren't any other jobs. It's not like they go, well, I'd like to have this good job, but maybe I go work a shitty one for a while. It doesn't pay me well. Because there's no other jobs. That's just like Steph said. The Democrats should be proposing an infrastructure spending bill that gives people jobs who want one. Ron?
Well, no, I was just going to say there's also sort of this stigma in the contemporary of the United States where it's like you're in the wrong to want more.
Yeah.
You're in the wrong to want what you deserve as a worker working
Right.
an honest job for 40 hours a week, which is a living wage, benefits, and a reasonable working environment. A lot of people get none of those things. And it's crazy to want something better. Well, no, it's not crazy. We used to have that in this country, and we were a very flourishing country when that was the case, and we need to go back to that again.
There's capitalism's success story. There's your fucking success story. There's your success story. Top private employer, the most employees and families getting food stamps. That's not a special kind of capitalism. That's capitalism. That's just regular capitalism. That's where it leads. That's regular capitalism. That's where it leads. And that's why you have to have unbelievable regulation. You have to make sure that there's unions. You have to protect them like FDR did. You have to protect unions. Otherwise, you get this. This is what you get. You get a handful of rich motherfuckers and the rest of the country's poor. And you know what that means? That means a revolution. That means people in the streets. How much longer do you think you could do? How much longer do you think people can see headlines like Jeff Bezos, the richest motherfucker in the world, and his employees are starving? How much longer do you think, when people don't have anything left to lose, they're going to go into the streets and they're going to find out where Jeff Bezos lives and they're going to go to his house? Let's have a march on Jeff Bezos' house. Is that wrong to do? You know what? He's the richest guy in the world. I bet he can afford security. I say I'm going to find out where he lives and I'm going to say, let's get him. Let's have a march to Jeff Bezos' house and ask what he's going to do with that $100 billion and why doesn't he pay a living wage? Let's figure that out. If you know where he lives, send it to me. I'll look it up. Guess?
I just wanted to read one of Jeff Bezos' tweets about philanthropy.
Yes, please read it, Steph. Jeff, let's get ready for a bunch of bullshit, ladies and gentlemen.
This is a request for ideas.
Yeah, he doesn't know how to help people. He has to outsource ideas on how to help people.
I'm thinking about philanthropy strategies that is the opposite of how I mostly spend my time working on the long term for philanthropy. I find I'm drawn to the other end of the spectrum right now.
Yeah.
As one example, I'm very inspired and moved by the work done at Mary's Place here in Seattle. I like long term. It's a huge lever. Blue Origin, Amazon, Washington Post, all these are contributing to the society and civilization in their own ways. But I'm thinking I want much of my philanthropic activity to be helping people in the here and now.
So you know what I said to him when he tweeted that out? I said, here's an idea for your philanthropy. Why not pay your workers a living wage, you fucking douchebag? But you won't pay them a living wage because you don't give a fuck about people. You don't want to do philanthropy. You don't give a shit. If you gave a shit about people, you'd give them a living wage. And Jeff Bezos doesn't give a fuck about you and the people who generate his income, his profits. He doesn't care about anybody in this country. He doesn't care about anybody but himself, like a true narcissistic megalomaniac, which is what he is. With a lot of power. Hangs around with the Secretary of Defense, the richest guy in the world, hanging out with the Secretary of Defense, and he owns the Washington Post, and half of all internet purchases in the United States go through him. What could go wrong? What could possibly go wrong? Oh, this could happen. Everybody who works for a living in the United States is fucking broke. How about that? In the meantime, make sure you're still subscribed, because they don't want you to see this news show. They want you to watch bullshit like MSNBC and CNN. That's what they're pushing on YouTube right now. I just saw a video today from MSNBC that was a piece of shit video that no one would have watched a year ago. It had 250,000 views. No one used to watch MSNBC on YouTube. No one. So they got a new algorithm that fucks over independent news people in favor of them. And now they're getting 250,000 views. Rachel Maddow never got that on YouTube. Chris Hayes never. They had to beg people. They thought Luke Russert was going to be their conduit to the fucking YouTube people. Luke Russert. That's their idea to give to YouTube people. Luke Russert. So please make sure you're subscribed. And even if you think you are, double check. And then click that bell so you get a notification when we drop a video. Please make sure if you watch us through Xbox or whatever, they're going to unsubscribe you. So make sure you're subscribed and come see one of our live shows February 16th. It's a Friday night in Burbank, California. We have a list of shows. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com. Become a patron. Thanks for your support.